My name is Ellis. Not a flashy guy, not the loudest voice in the room, but I've always believed in loyalty, in doing the right thing. Especially when it came to my wife, Lindra. She was the ambitious one. Always sharp-dressed, quick-witted, the kind of woman who could turn a silent boardroom into her personal stage. I loved her. Deeply, stupidly, some might say. And maybe they were right. When she told me about the Madrid trip, her eyes sparkled like opportunity itself. Just 3 days, babe. Investor summit. All women in tech. Super exclusive. I smiled like a supportive husband should, even helped her pack. Still, something in her voice felt off. Like she rehearsed the words. Like they didn't quite belong to her. I asked, half joking, are these investors humans, or just rich single men with yachts? She laughed. Don't be jealous, Ellis. You know I'm not like that. And I wanted to believe her. But that night, after she fell asleep, I sat alone on the couch, staring at her boarding pass on the kitchen island. Madrid. Business class. One way. Wait, what? My stomach tightened. I told myself it was probably just a mix-up. Surely, she'd booked the returns separately. Lindra was spontaneous. Confident. Not a cheater. Right? But something inside me whispered, then why can't you sleep? And I didn't. Not that night. Not for the next 3. The day Lindra landed in Madrid, I texted her right away. Landed safe. No reply. Okay, maybe she was tired. Jet lag. Meetings. That's what she said this trip was about. Meeting investors, networking, finding funding for her startup that, quite frankly, always felt more like a fantasy than a business. By evening, I tried calling. No answer. Just voicemail and that cold, robotic voice that suddenly sounded a lot like distance. By day 2, my mind was chewing itself alive. I checked her socials. Nothing. Her business email had an auto-reply. Even her assistant, Haley, messaged back. She told me not to disturb her this weekend. Investor bonding, I guess. Bonding? That word stuck with me like a splinter in the brain. Since when did Lindra bond with investors? I scrolled through our old texts, trying to find reassurance in her words, like maybe there was a love you or miss you I'd overlooked. But her last message before the flight? Just, don't forget to feed Daisy. She gets nervous when I'm gone. Daisy's our cat. Not I'll miss you. Not love you. Just the cat. I sat at the kitchen table that night, phone in hand, the clock ticking past midnight. The silence wasn't just in Madrid, it was in my house, my chest, my stupid trusting heart. I didn't want to admit it then, but I was unraveling. Doubt has a smell, you know? It's like cold sweat and regret. Still, I told myself, wait. Just wait. Don't be that guy who assumes the worst. Lindra's a career woman. She's busy. But in the back of my mind, I heard a voice I'd ignored for years. Busy with what? Or with who? On the 3rd day of her investor trip, I got a message, but not from Lindra. It was from my old college buddy, Callum. We hadn't spoken in years, but he was always traveling for work, bouncing between continents like it was nothing. The message read, hey man, wild coincidence. Pretty sure I saw your wife last night in Madrid. She was at this rooftop lounge with some tall guy in a beige suit. Thought I'd check in. Unless you've got a twin wife. My hands went numb. I called him immediately, stumbling over words like a fool. He was casual, even amused. Yeah, man. I wasn't trying to stir anything up, but I saw her. I swear. She was leaning on the guy's shoulder, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Leaning. Laughing. Lindra didn't lean on people. She leaned on ambition, power, and her own ego. If she let herself be soft, it wasn't with me lately. Did you get a photo? I asked, almost whispering. Actually, yeah. He paused. Hang on, I'll send it. But hey, maybe it's just business. The picture came through seconds later. There she was, my wife, in a black silk dress I didn't recognize. The one with the slit running too high and neckline plunging too low. Clinking glasses with a stranger. Her lips close to his ear. Her hand on his thigh. I stared at the image for minutes. You know that feeling when your stomach just gives up? Like your body decides it doesn't want to carry your heart anymore because it's too damn heavy? That was me. Right there, hunched over on our kitchen floor, eyes burning, cat meowing at my side like she knew something was wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there and whispered to myself, why her? Why me? Why does it always happen to men like me who try to be good? I wish I could say I stopped loving her that moment. But the truth is, I still hope there was a misunderstanding. That photo wasn't her, maybe. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe it was me being paranoid. But in my gut, something had already shattered. And there's no unbreaking glass once it hits the floor. Lindra came back on a Tuesday. Not a hug. Not a kiss. Just a slammed suitcase and a half-hearted, "Hey, can you help me bring in the samples from the trunk?" Samples. Like she had just returned from a trade show, not from another man's arms in a different country. I stared at her. The same woman I had built a life with. Her skin glowed a little more than usual, and she walked like she wasn't carrying guilt. Only expensive perfume and maybe secrets in her pockets. "Didn't you get my texts?" I asked. She blinked, annoyed. "Ellis, I told you I wouldn't have time to chat. It was nonstop pitching, meetings, mixers. Investors want FaceTime. That's how the game is played." "Right. FaceTime." I swallowed down every emotion that clawed at my throat and asked the one question I couldn't hold in anymore. "Who's the guy in the beige suit?" Her smile didn't even falter. "What guy?" "Don't lie, Lindra," I said, finally showing her the photo Callum sent me. "This guy?" "You. Rooftop. His lap." She glanced at it for barely a second. "Oh, please. That's just Raphael. One of the investors. Spaniards are handsy. It's cultural. Grow up, Ellis." She snatched the phone from my hand, deleted the image, and dropped it back onto the counter like she'd just swatted a mosquito. "You're embarrassing yourself," she muttered. "And me? No guilt. No shame. Not even a flicker of discomfort in her eyes. Just cold, practiced deflection, like she'd been through this script before. I stood there stunned. "You expect me to believe that was business?" She leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "I expect you to remember who pays the mortgage." And just like that, she disappeared upstairs. No explanation. No apology. Just a trail of her heels clicking like a metronome of indifference. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind louder than any noise outside. I thought about every time I supported her dreams, took on extra work to keep her business alive, canceled plans so she could network. And now? Now she walked back into my house with someone else's fingerprints on her soul and treated me like the doormat she forgot to wipe her stilettos on. But the worst part? A part of me still wanted to believe her. That's the thing with love. Sometimes it makes you betray yourself long before they ever do. 3 weeks passed. Quiet ones. Lindra moved through the house like nothing had happened. Like I was a passing breeze in the background of her new, glittering world. I tried to talk about us, about Madrid, about the space growing between us like mold under the wallpaper, but she waved me off every time. "Ellis, I have investor calls. Ellis, I need to focus. Ellis, can't you see I'm trying to build something real here?" As if what we had built wasn't real. As if a marriage was somehow less legitimate than her endless fantasy of being the next female tech mogul. And then, on a rainy Thursday morning, I found it. I had gone into the bathroom to grab a towel. Nothing unusual, until I saw the pink and white box on the counter. A pregnancy test. It was open. Curiosity turned my blood to ice as I looked closer. The stick lay on the sink, like a forgotten weapon. 2 lines. Bold. Clear. Positive. At first, I smiled. "I know, it's ridiculous," I smiled. Because for a fleeting second, I thought this was some sort of divine intervention. Maybe, just maybe, this was our turning point. A child. A second chance. A reason to fix what was broken. But then I remembered something I'd buried deep in the pit of my chest. We hadn't been intimate in almost 4 months. My legs buckled slightly as the realization hit. It wasn't mine. It couldn't be mine. I waited for her in the kitchen. Didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stared at the front door like it might offer answers. When she walked in, sunglasses still on despite the clouds, coffee in hand, I simply held up the test. She froze. Her jaw clenched. "Congratulations," I said, my voice hoarse. Or should I say congratulations to Raphael? She didn't speak. Not right away. Her silence was worse than any shouting match. It was confirmation. It was confession without a word. Finally, she sighed, set down her coffee, and said, "Ellis, I didn't want to tell you like this. Tell me what exactly?" She looked at me with that same calm detachment, as if this was some HR meeting, not the implosion of a marriage. "That I'm keeping the baby." The words hit like a punch to the ribs. "And what about me?" I asked. "You," she scoffed. "You're not involved in this. You wouldn't understand." I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound I didn't recognize coming from my own mouth. "I gave you everything. My time, my savings, my trust. And now I'm not even part of the equation. You were always too small for the life I wanted, Ellis." She turned her back and walked upstairs. I stood in that kitchen, hands trembling, breath caught in my throat. Too small. No, Lindra. I wasn't too small. You were just too hollow to see what mattered. After that day, I stopped trying. Stopped asking her how she slept. Stopped pretending to care about her investor decks sprawled all over the dining table like sacred scripture. She didn't wear her wedding ring anymore. Said it made her fingers swell. Hormonal changes, apparently. I started sleeping in the guest room permanently. She didn't protest. I think she liked it that way. One less variable to manage. But I didn't mope. Not anymore. I planned. I spent nights going through bank statements, tracing transfers she never mentioned, noting charges in Madrid that had nothing to do with business, spas, boutiques, even a €600 dinner for two at a place called El Marfil. I Googled it. Candlelit rooftop dining, violinist on Thursdays, champagne imported from Reims. She was building a new life, all right, and financing it with the bones of ours. Then I found a real knife in the gut, an unsigned draft of a post-nuptial agreement tucked away in her office drawer. I only discovered it because our cat, Daisy, knocked over a stack of folders chasing a moth. Lindra never said a word about this draft, but there it was, clauses about asset separation in the event of emotional instability on the husband's part, and a note in the margin that read, "Present this after launch. Wait for public momentum to peak." She wasn't planning a future with me. She was preparing for my exit. Strategically, coldly. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to her, to myself. I needed to remind the shell of a man I'd become that I was once something more than her plan B. I wrote every lie she told, every moment I covered for her, every dream I dimmed so hers could burn brighter. I listed them like sins, but not mine. Hers. Then I placed it in an envelope and sealed it. Taped it to the inside of my nightstand drawer. A reminder that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal with a plan. In the days that followed, I quietly began packing the things that mattered. Not clothes, not gadgets, documents, keys, photos from my parents, the deed to my late uncle's cabin upstate, a place she never liked visiting. I told her I had a work conference that weekend. She barely looked up from her laptop. Cool. Just don't forget Daisy's wet food. She's picky. That was all I got. No questions. No concern. Just indifference wrapped in Wi-Fi signals and startup dreams. As I zipped my bag closed, I glanced over at her. She was busy writing some pitch deck, humming to herself. The glow of her screen lit her face. But she looked nothing like the woman I married. She looked like a stranger I once loved, before she turned me into someone I no longer recognized. I didn't say goodbye. I left at 4:47 a.m. on Saturday, just as the sky turned that bruised shade of blue before sunrise. The street was silent. Even the wind felt like it was holding its breath for me. Daisy sat by the window, her green eyes wide as she watched me carry the last box to the car. I paused, crouched beside her, and whispered, "You'll be okay, baby girl. You deserve better company." I didn't leave a note for Lindra. That would have given her a story to twist, something dramatic to mock behind closed doors with Raphael, or whatever other investor-turned-lover she'd stashed in her phone under fake business names. She didn't deserve an ending crafted by me. Instead, I left my wedding ring on the coffee maker. That machine mattered more to her than I did by the end anyway. I drove for hours, north, into the woods, away from everything that had become a slow-motion car crash in my life. The further I got from the city, the lighter I felt. Like every mile peeled her off my skin, inch by inch. The cabin was dusty and silent. No cell service. No Wi-Fi. Just creaky floorboards and the gentle hum of insects in the trees. For the first time in months, I could hear myself think without hearing her voice inside my head, correcting me, belittling me, managing me like some underperforming employee she regretted hiring. I spent the next few days in solitude, reading books I hadn't touched in years, cooking over a tiny gas stove, writing long, rambling thoughts about the years I lost chasing someone who had stopped running beside me a long time ago. And slowly, something strange happened. I began to laugh again. Not loud or often, but I laughed when I realized how ridiculous it was that I used to measure my worth by how many times she said thank you in a week. I laughed when I remembered how she once told me I overreacted after she forgot our anniversary, because dates are just numbers unless there's funding attached. But most of all, I laughed because she genuinely believed I'd never leave, that I'd cling like a loyal puppy while she built her empire on the ashes of our marriage. A week after I vanished, the calls began, or so I assume. I'd driven into town once, just long enough to buy groceries and check a public computer at the library. Dozens of emails, missed calls, a few voicemails forwarded to my inbox. Ellis, we need to talk. This is childish. Come home. You're really going to abandon me while I'm pregnant? Ellis, please. But the one that broke through my calm? A single line in the subject of her last email. It's not Raphael's. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. She could have written a novel of excuses, spun a new fantasy full of soft words, and maybe even a tear or two. But I had found peace in the quiet. And some truths don't need a reply. Months passed. Autumn came and colored the trees around the cabin in fiery gold and rust. The silence that once felt suffocating became something else entirely. Peace. Not emptiness, but space. Space to rebuild, not just my life, but myself. I never went back to our house. Sold my share through a lawyer. Left Lindra the furniture, the espresso machine, the mirrors she loved more than she ever loved me. Let her keep the walls. I took back my soul. She tried again, of course. More emails. Messages from mutual friends saying she looked terrible, that she was lost without me. I ignored it all. I had already mourned the version of her I thought was real. No use chasing shadows. One day, I got a letter in the cabin's old rusted mailbox. Handwritten. No return address. Just a few words. I saw him. You were right to leave. I'm sorry. No signature. Just that. Maybe it was her. Maybe not. It didn't matter. Because by then, I had already met someone new. Not in the romantic way you might think. No dramatic love story. Just a quiet presence named Evangeline, who worked part-time at the town's bookstore. She spoke softly, laughed with her whole chest, and asked questions because she genuinely wanted to know the answers. She never made me feel small. We started with coffee, then long walks, then silence, the good kind. The kind where no one needs to prove anything. One snowy evening, she asked, "What happened to you before this life?" And I told her the truth. Not all at once, not bitterly. Just truth. She didn't flinch. She nodded, held my hand, and said, "You survived. That's more than most." And just like that, I realized survival isn't just crawling away from the fire. It's choosing not to walk back into it. Lindra may still be out there, pitching to investors, raising a child with someone whose name keeps changing. Maybe she's found peace, maybe not. But me? I live in a small town now, surrounded by trees, silence, and people who see me, not just what I provide. I write. I breathe. I laugh. I am not who I was. And that's the best ending I could have hoped for. The man she broke is gone. The man I became, he's finally home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Your support means the world and keeps these stories coming.